I used to hike alone after work. It was my way to shut the laptop and breathe actual air. There's a state trail near my town where the path rises through steep switchbacks, then opens to a ridge with an overlook. Even in summer, it gets dark quick under the firs. This happened on a Friday in late August. I started up around 6:30 p.m. The lot had only 3 cars. The heat sat low in the trees and flies bumped my neck like little annoying fists. I remember thinking the trail smelled like warm sap and damp leather. The first switchback is the worst. It's steep and gravelly. Around that turn I heard it, a whistle. 3 notes. Bright and clean. Not a song I recognized, but deliberate. I figured it was another hiker. I said, "Hey," half out of breath, and kept moving. A few minutes later I heard it again. The exact same 3 notes. Closer this time. When I stopped, the forest sound moved around me. Leaves ticking, a branch clacking somewhere high. But whoever was whistling didn't move. Just those 3 notes. "Hello?" I called, feeling dumb for talking to trees. Nothing. On the 3rd switchback, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. One of the small orange trail markers nailed to a stump was flipped upside down. It's the kind of thing you wouldn't notice unless you'd hiked it a dozen times. I have. That marker is never upside down. The whistle came again, but to my left, off the trail. Short, sharp, and perfect. Like the person had the notes printed in their head. I muttered, "Okay, buddy," and kept going. I told myself it was some teenager playing a prank. Still, I reached for the cheap aluminum whistle on my pack strap. I didn't blow it. Not yet. At the overlook, the sun fell behind a row of distant ridges and turned the sky banded and bruised. I usually sit there. This time I just stood, caught between the view and the hunch that I should get moving. The ridge felt wrong, too quiet. No dusk birds, no insect whine. Just my pulse and a thin breeze that smelled like cold stone. On the first step down, there it was again. 3 notes. But now they came from the path below me, like someone had climbed while I watched the sky. "Hey," I called louder. "Trail's narrow. Tell me where you are." The answer was the whistle, only this time it came in pairs. The second set sounded farther away, like an echo that wasn't an echo. I started down anyway, because what else was I going to do, sleep up there? I moved quickly, boots crunching. Turned a corner, and there in the dirt were fresh shoe prints. Not boots, sneakers. The tread was shallow and splayed. The prints faced uphill toward me. I crouched to look. The edges were crisp. No dust settling. Whoever made them was close. The whistle came again. 3 notes, but it was behind me now, back toward the overlook. I spun so fast my pack thumped my spine. Nothing, just the throat of trail and the dark wood beyond it. Something changed in that moment. I can't explain it better than this. I felt watched by something that knew where to stand so I couldn't see it. It was that calculated. I started jogging. The next switchback has a rotted log along the inside edge. Someone had pried the orange trail marker from that log and stuck it in the dirt upside down like a tiny flag. I said, "Okay," out loud in this short, panicked voice. I remember thinking, they're marking the wrong way. I kept moving until I hit the last long straight. It runs beside a drop-off choked with sword ferns. I forced myself to look down into them. A face could have been 6 feet away and I wouldn't have seen it. 3 notes. Not loud, not far. This time there was a laugh behind them. Not a full laugh. More like someone exhaling with their teeth together. It might have been the wind teasing through brush, but my body decided it wasn't. I blew my own whistle. One long, ugly blast that sprayed saliva and panic. The sound bounced off trunks and came back gargled and small. I did it again, and then I was running. At the trailhead, the lot held only 1 car, not 3. Mine and a beat-up sedan with the driver's door open a few inches, as if someone had gotten out in a hurry and forgotten to shut it. I scanned the seats, empty. I slammed my door, started the engine, and did something stupid. I looked at the tree line. Not just a glance. I looked long enough to see a shape step from behind a trunk, the way a person peels themselves off a shadow. Whoever it was never looked at me. They stared at the trail, then tilted their head back and whistled those 3 notes again, except this time they were flat, like the melody had been dragged over gravel. I drove home with my interior lights on. All weekend, my phone kept alerting to airdrop requests from an unknown sender named 3. I don't have airdrop on. I don't even own an iPhone. I haven't been back to that trail. A friend who still goes says some of the markers are pulled out and stuck upside down along the wrong spur path. He said the last time he went at dusk, the woods were full of short three-note whistles overlapping, like there were more than one person. Or like one person had learned how to be in several places at once. I asked him if he saw anyone. He said no, but I think they saw me. I spent a summer working as a camp counselor out west. On our days off, a few of us would do shorter hikes so we could be back before curfew. One afternoon, my friend Jamie and I decided to check out a slot canyon a few miles from camp. It's one of those narrow, sandy corridors where the wind runs like water, and the light is always dim. We entered late, close to 5 p.m., with a storm building on the horizon. You don't mess with flash floods in slot canyons, but we stupidly figured we'd be quick. The walls were a bruised red, cool to the touch. Sand squeaked under our boots. Half a mile in, the canyon pinched so tight we had to turn sideways. The wind crawled over the rock and made this low, throat-singing hum. That's when we heard it. Jamie? A voice soft. A woman's, maybe. It didn't echo. It just lived in the air for a second and then died. Jamie froze. Did you hear that? Yeah, I said. Left side, he said no. It knew my name. We went still and listened. The wind worked. Sand hissed along the rock. Then Jamie? Clearer this time, closer. Jamie cupped his hands. Hello, you okay? Nothing. The canyon opened, a good sign, and we followed a dogleg right where the floor sank into a shallow bowl. Our footprints were the only marks on the sand. I remember that detail because I checked. No other hikers. No animal tracks, nothing. Then the voice again behind us, now lower, like it had leaned close to our ears. Jamie? Only the lilt was wrong, like the speaker didn't quite understand the shape of the name. Jumi. It fell off at the end. Jamie whispered, We're leaving. The wind shifted, cool and damp, and carried a mineral smell that wasn't rain. It was like wet pennies and bone. We turned to go and saw our own footprints leading back into the narrow pass. Overlapping them like a tracing were other prints. Bare feet, long toes. The stride was off, too short, like someone walked while balancing on a rope. The arches didn't sink into the sand. The toes dug in deep. Jamie, it said, almost tender. Jamie, wait. This is where everything went wrong. We lost the way. If you've been in slot canyons, you know how one corner becomes another. The walls repeat like a pattern. The wind blew stronger, now carrying a high, thin note like something metal vibrating. We rounded a turn and saw something wedged high in a narrow gap. An aluminum water bottle, smashed flat as if it had been crushed in a fist. Scratched into it with something sharp were letters, N-O. Then a line below, T-U-R-N. The last letters were missing or scraped away. We ran. Panic made the canyon smaller, closer. We hit a dead end that wasn't there before. A wall of smooth, rippled stone that somehow felt recent, as if the canyon had decided it wanted to be different. Jamie? The voice came from above. Not from the rim, not up where a person would be, but from the rock itself, thin as a crack. Jamie's breath sawed in and out. It knows my name. It's just the wind, I lied. Jamie, it breathed. And then, like a voice trying on a new shape, J-I-me. We backed out, turned, and nearly ran into a tall, narrow opening we hadn't noticed. The air that flowed from it was cold and smelled like old stone. The voice inside was softer, coaxing. Jamie, here. Don't, I whispered, grabbing his pack. No. The sky flickered white and the first hammer of thunder arrived. The wind reversed like someone had thrown a switch. Sand lifted off the floor in thin snakes. We stumbled the other way, following the path of our overlapping footprints, ours and the strange ones, until we met a second set of prints coming in from a side cleft. Those new ones were human, hiking boots, deeper on the left foot like the person favored one leg. They joined ours, and then stopped. No more boot prints, just the long-toed bare ones pacing over ours like they were measuring us. We reached the mouth of the canyon as the wall of rain hit. A ranger truck was idling in the lot, wipers frantic. The ranger leaned out the window and shouted that we were idiots. Yeah, Jamie said, shaking. We know. The ranger stared at our boots. You two came out alone? Yeah, I said. Just us, he nodded. Then whose prints? Oh, never mind. Get in. In the truck, the radio hissed and whined. Between the static, a voice broke through, just enough to hear the shape of a name pulled thin like taffy. J, me. We pretended not to hear it. The ranger didn't comment, but his hand was white on the wheel. We went back the next morning like fools do to see our tracks washed away. The canyon floor was smooth as skin. We checked the spot where the water bottle had been wedged. It was gone, but on the wall, scratched with something hard and shaky, were the letters NOTURN, and under them, a deep score that started straight and then darted sideways, like whatever made it was distracted by something that moved. Sometimes when the wind rises between buildings in my city, it threads itself into that same shape, a name squeezed thin and wrong. I change sidewalks. I don't go back to any place that makes the wind sound like a mouth. I did a week-long solo on a section of an old mountain trail. The third night, storms blew in. I took shelter at a 3-sided lean-to about 9 miles off a forest road. The structure was heavy timber, dark with years of smoke. A trail log and a Ziploc hung from a nail. The air inside was damp, the kind that makes old wood sweat. I lit my small lantern and ate. The rain came in steady ropes and hissed in the trees. I was grateful for the roof until I noticed the marks. They covered the inside wall to the right of the log, 7 vertical scratches, each the length of an arm. Some went deep, furrowing the beam. The ends weren't ragged like from a knife. They were rounded like claws dragging to a slow stop. The first entry I pulled from the logbook was 3 weeks old. 2 a.m. scratches at back wall. Thought it was a bear. Not a bear. No smell. Next entry. Stop at road instead. Don't stay here. Then a childish scrawl. He knocks 3 times. I told myself storms bring weird noises. I set my mat on the left side, away from the scratched wall. The rain softened at midnight. The woods got their breath back. I almost slept. Then tap, 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 not the polite kind. A knuckle-on-wood sound at the far outside corner of the shelter. I held my breath. The taps moved, tap at the back beam, tap at the roof brace, tap near my boots, as if a single knuckle dragged along the structure, stopping to think. Hello? I said, voice too loud, no answer. The lantern flickered once, then went steady. I unzipped my bag. My hand found the knife I never use, more a camp superstition than a tool. The tapping returned, higher now on the beam above my head. It was longer, The sound warmed the wood like fingers pressed there. The logbook sat near my elbow. I opened to the back. Someone had scribbled a note in smeared pencil. If you hear tapping, don't look out, that's all. No explanation. Just the rule, so I didn't. I stared at the opposite wall. The 7 long scratches seemed to move in the lamplight. Not actually move, but drift, like riverweeds in a current. I whispered to myself like a child. It's just rain expanding the timber. Then a new sound arrived. Breath. The warm, wet kind you hear when somebody is so close their nose almost touches your ear. Slow inhale, slow exhale. It came from the open side of the shelter. I imagined a face inches from the entry, concealed by the night beyond the drip line. I didn't look. I watched the 7 scratches, and while I watched, a new line appeared next to them, a faint, almost delicate score that deepened in a patient, downward motion. You can say it was a trick of my eyes or the lantern shifting. Fine. I will tell you what I saw. A fresh scratch growing, slow and even, without any sound. The breath at the opening warmed. Moisture gathered on my face. The smell was wrong. Not animal, not rot. It smelled like wet old paper, like a box of letters left in a basement too long. I said, please go, Small. The breath paused, then did something I didn't know breath could do. It listened. Then the tapping began again, but this time it came from behind me, from the solid back wall. Tap. 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 I hadn't moved. Nothing could be back there without breaking wood. The taps hurried, excited now, and I realized it wasn't tapping anymore. It was counting. 3, then 4, then 5. I don't know how I knew it, but I did. 6. The 7th tap landed exactly where the new scratch ended, as if that was the game. 7. In the morning, my lantern was dead. My knife lay on the floor at my side, blade snapped. I hadn't touched it. The 7 long scratches were still there, and so was the 8th. The thin new one I watched etch itself in the dark. I wrote a note in the log. He counts to 7. As I capped the pen, I noticed the paper pages felt damp, as if someone had breathed over each one, close, for a very long time. The next shelter down the trail had its own marks. Not scratches, holes. Each the size of a finger poked straight through the beam in a neat row, 7 of them. I didn't stay. I walked until I reached the road, and when a pickup finally stopped, the driver squinted at me like he'd found something washed up on the wrong shore. "Where you coming from?" "Shelter," I said. "Up trail." He nodded once, eyes flicking to my shoulder where the strap of my pack had worn a line of skin raw. He said, "You hear any tapping?" "Yeah, He didn't ask anything else, but as we bounced down the forest road, he counted softly under his breath. Not 1 to 7, backwards, as if he was trying to unspool a number that kept nodding itself. My sister and I did a long weekend loop in a coastal mountain range where fog drifts in like sleep. Day 2. We detoured to a decommissioned fire lookout at the peak. The tower was a metal skeleton with a glass cab on top. The windows were clouded with age and salt. Some panes held handprints where tourists had wiped circles clear. No one's supposed to stay there, but hikers sometimes do. You can see forever when it's clear. It wasn't clear. It was white, like we were inside a lung. The tower's metal stairs rang under our boots. At the top, the door was chained. Someone had twisted wire through the chain like a makeshift lock. We peered through the glass. Inside, a table, a rusted stove, a cot with a dark shape on it. "Sleeping bag," I said. But even as I said it, the shape's edges felt wrong, too stiff, too folded. Like a person-shaped paper thing. "Let's go," my sister said, sudden. "Wait, did you see that?" I pointed at the far window. The fog outside boiled and pressed against the glass like slow water, and in one clear oval someone had drawn a smiley face. The simple kind, 2 dots and a curve. We hadn't seen it on the way up. "Okay," my sister said, voice tight. "We're gone." The metal stairs groaned as we descended. Halfway down, we heard movement inside the cab. Not footsteps. The sound of something sliding across the floor. A long, dry slide like cardboard pushed over concrete. Then a soft, steady tap at the window, measured and patient. We didn't turn around. We stepped as quietly as metal stairs allow. We reached the ground and went for the trail. The fog wrapped us. The tower's shape vanished after 20 steps. My sister said, too calm, "You saw the smiley face, too." "Yeah." We didn't talk again until we hit a junction. The signpost had arrows to lakes, ridge, and road. All 3 arrows had been rotated so they pointed in circles. Ridge to road, to lakes to ridge. The wood around each screw was freshly stripped, fibers fringing out like hair. We took the road because at least that was downhill. The fog thinned, then thickened as if breathed by something enormous. At the next bend, we stopped. Lined up along the trail were glove prints in the mud. Not handprints, glove prints. You could see the fabric weave, the seam lines, the little grippy dots on the palms. They ran in 2 perfect rows down the middle of the path, left and right, like someone had crawled there very carefully. Halfway down the row, the glove prints became bare handprints, pressed deep. The fingers were long and thin. The palms were dry, or they had been. The prints had a dusty look, like they were too clean to belong to someone real. We heard the tower again behind us. That dry, patient sliding. Except there was no way we could hear it from this far, and there was no wind carrying sound uphill. We moved faster. A quarter-mile later, the fog opened for a second, and we saw it through the trees. The tower on a hill that shouldn't be there. The cab, a tiny square with a dark shape moving inside it. The chain on the door swung as if it had been opened and then closed again. We ran. At a stream crossing, the water was low and braided around stones. On the biggest rock, someone had arranged coins in a tight spiral. Pennies, mostly, a few nickels, all face up, all green with age except the one in the center, which shone like it had been polished. My sister whispered, "Don't touch them." As if that were the real danger, not the other thing. We reached the road a little before dusk. A truck with a county seal sat there. A woman in a tan jacket leaned against it, arms crossed. "You 2 from the tower?" "No," I said too fast. "We were just on the loop." She lifted her chin toward the fog behind us. "Someone keeps getting inside. Folks think the door's a challenge. Then they leave junk up there. Food, coins, drawings. Every time we clear it, it fills again." "We didn't go in," my sister said. The woman studied us. "I know you wouldn't talk so normal if you had. What's up there?" I asked. She shrugged, but it was the kind where the shoulders don't move as much as the eyes do. Depends who you ask. Some say it's a person who stayed too long and got thin in the wrong places. Some say it's the fog itself practicing being a person. She paused. Did it tap at you? We didn't answer. We didn't need to. She nodded. Keep walking. As we left, she called after us. If you hear tapping when you get home at your window, don't wipe the glass. That night, back in the city, I woke to a soft, dry sound at my apartment window. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't move. I didn't look. In the morning, there was a clean oval in the fog on the glass, and inside it, someone had drawn a smiley face. The curve of the mouth was just a little too long. I live up north where the trails run through black spruce and muskeg. Winter hiking is beautiful and quiet in a way that can make you feel like you've been erased. A buddy and I took a route to an old trapper's cabin that sits off a frozen river bend. Locals said the cabin was still stocked with a potbelly stove and a lousy bunk. We left before dawn. The cold had that metallic bite that makes your nose feel hollow. Snow squeaked under our snowshoes. The river lay flat and blue-white with a seam of black where current had eaten the ice thin. We found the cabin settled into a stand of trees like a hunched animal. The door opened easily. Inside was exactly what we'd been promised. Stove, bunk, a shelf with dusty canned goods, a steel thermos dented like a skull, and something extra, a rusty radio set with a cracked front, the kind with a big dial and a sound like distant bees when it's on. You think this thing works? My buddy asked. Doubt it. He turned the knob anyway. The radio woke with a cough. Static filled the cabin in a way that changed the air, like the room had been empty and now wasn't. We made a fire and melted snow. The stove ticked as it warmed. Around mid-afternoon, the radio thunked and hissed, then a voice pressed through the static, thin as thread. Is anyone on the river? I looked at my friend. He turned the dial gently. Hello? Who's this? Silence. Then, don't come out after dark. Why? My friend said, half laughing. Is this a ranger? Where are you? The voice didn't answer. It sounded like it spoke from a long hallway. When it returned, it said, If you hear the snow speak, don't answer. We exchanged a look. You're messing with us, I said into the radio, when we're alone out here, nice try. The voice, calmer now like it had figured out how to be clearer, said, No, you're not. I turned the radio off. Static died like a breath held too long. My friend smiled a brave smile that used a lot of teeth. Local prank, he said. Someone with a set in a cabin upriver. By dusk, wind combed the trees and made a sound like distant traffic. We decided to sleep and leave early. I woke once to pee and stood in the doorway looking at the snow. It seemed to lean toward the cabin. No tracks, just a soft gathered slope facing the door as if the wind had only blown from one direction. My breath smoked out and twisted, then broke into thin strands and fell. At 3:12 a.m., I know the time because my watch lit the inside of my coat. A sound woke me. Not wind, not the stove. A voice from outside the cabin. It sounded like a man trying to talk with a mouthful of crushed ice. Words broke clean and then fell apart. Hello? Hello? The voice moved along the wall like a slow, curious hand. I didn't get up. The voice stopped by the window. Tap. Not a knock, more like a finger asking a question. Then a second voice answered from the radio, which had turned itself on. Don't answer. The outside voice tried again. Cold. Let me in. The syllables slid like melting sugar. See. Old, my friend whispered from the bunk. We should help him. Hold on, I whispered back. Listen. The voice outside didn't cough, didn't shiver. The breaths were even, like reading lines. The radio whispered, Don't come out, don't come out. What are you? I asked it. Static stretched, then the same tired voice from earlier. I'm what's left of a man who thought it was polite to answer his name. Don't say your names. Outside, the voice perked up as if it heard something good. Names. It tried the word like a new thing on the tongue. We didn't speak. The snow creaked as something stepped lightly near the door. The doors, Latch shifted once, twice, as if tested by a hand that didn't grab so much as push and rest. The stove ticked loudly, and the thing paused at each tick like it was counting a clock it had just met. After a long minute, the radio said, "It'll go when the river does." I didn't understand. Not until we heard it. The groan of shifting ice. The water beneath us moved. The river spoke in its slow winter language. After that sound, the voice outside drifted away, repeating a new word it had learned. Riv or river. The cabin walls relaxed. Air warmed. I fell back into a sleep that felt like sinking through sifted flour. At dawn, we packed. Outside, the snow around the cabin was smooth except for one place where a long, shallow trench ran from the door to the river, as if someone had dragged a wide piece of cloth across the surface. Not footsteps. Not an animal. A drag. We killed the stove, locked the door out of habit it didn't deserve, and stepped onto the river ice. The wind had calmed. Everything carried that hush you get before a weather switch. We moved slow, poles probing ahead. The trench in the snow ran parallel to us for a while, then veered toward the bend. Halfway across, the radio in my pack clicked on by itself. I don't know how. I hadn't brought batteries for it. Static so soft it felt like it came from inside my head, and then the whisper, "Don't answer." We didn't. We didn't speak at all. The trench met the thin seam of black open water near the far bank. It ended abruptly at the edge, as if whatever made it had leaned over the river to look, and either decided something or fell in. Back home, I keep the radio in my garage unplugged, cracked face staring the wrong way on a shelf. Some nights when the snow outside glows blue, I hear it click faintly, like a throat clearing before a bad idea. Twice now, just as I drifted off, I've heard a voice outside my bedroom window say hello in that same broken, careful way. I don't answer. I lie there and listen to my own breath and the number of taps the baseboard makes as it cools. The taps always stop at 7. The radio never turns all the way off.